So a friend of mine had a take-home job interview, and they wanted him to take this JSON object and turn it into a CSV. Now, the cool thing about this project, or at least this code challenge, is that it's an object within an object, and there's another object inside of there. So this is a good coding challenge that I thought I should make a video on it, in case someone else has a question in regards to it. So let's go ahead and write this in Python. Now they wanted him to use, they didn't want him to use any libraries in order to do this project or this coding challenge. So we will use one library. We'll use a JSON library. But other than that, we won't use any other libraries. All right, we'll begin by writing a function, and we'll just call this export to CSV. Now the first thing we need to do is open up the JSON file. So we'll do with open, and we'll just do data.json as f. Now we'll need to store all of our data inside of a list. It'll be a list within a list, and you'll see the reason why we'll do this later. But so we'll create a list here, and then we'll do data equals JSON.loads. This will load all of our data into this variable that we call data. Then what we'll do is we'll use a temporary variable, and we'll just get, because first thing we want to do is get the headers. If you take a look at this, as I mentioned, this is an entire object. So this is an entire object here, but we also have an object within an object. So we have this object, and then address is an object, and then geo is another object inside of the address object. And then we also have the company object inside of this object here. So the easiest way to do to get all the property name or key names is to do a recursive function. And so what we'll do is we'll create a recursive function. We'll call it get header items, and let's put a header. Let's create another list, because it'll be a list within a list. So we'll do header items, and we'll pass in the header items here, and then we'll pass in our temporary object, because we just need the first object in this JSON array, because all of the key names are exactly the same. If we just look at the very first object, we'll have the key names for all of our items. Now in Python, a JSON object is something more than a dictionary, and so we can loop over that. Let's go ahead and just append these header items from our function to our list. So we'll just do header, or rather we'll do list one dot append, and we'll just append our header items. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and create our recursive function. We'll just do get header items, and this will be our items, and it will be our object. So we can loop over our object with just a for loop, and then we'll do if is instance obj okay. So what we're saying here is, as we're looping over these the key values, what we're going to say is, if this key value, if this object rather, is a dictionary, then what we want to do is go back into our recursive function. And we can, what we want to do actually is just go ahead and append this So what we want to do is go ahead and append the header name, or rather property name or key name, to our items list. So we'll just do items.append, and then what we'll do is get header items, and we'll pass in our list, and then we'll pass in our new JSON object. So let's go over this again. So as we loop over it, if that value, if it's equal to a dictionary, then we're going to we just want to get the name. Go ahead and append a name to our list, but then we're going to go ahead and go back into our function, and we want to go inside of that object. So we'll go ahead and do it else here, and then what we'll do is we'll just do an items.append x. Okay, that should work. We'll go ahead and do a print list1, and we'll go ahead and just type in Python. I am using Python 3. I don't have to type in Python 3. I only have Python 3 installed. So Python, and then we'll do main.py. I forgot to call my function. Perfect. So you can see this is a list within a list, right? So we have our beginning list, and you can see here the address, right, was a dictionary, and then street was another key inside of list. And the same thing with geo. And then we have lat and long, and then for company, then we have company name and so forth. Perfect. Now let's continue. The next thing we need to do, let's go ahead and get rid of that print. We no longer need it. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and just loop over our JSON object and append the values to our list. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do for obj in data. We'll need another temporary list here as well. So we'll just call that D. And we need to do the same exact thing here, because it's an object within an object. So what we'll do is we'll just copy this function, we'll paste it here, and then instead of calling it get header items, we'll say add items to data. Everything else should be able to stay the same. We'll make a couple of changes here in a second, but let's just go ahead and go here. So we'll pass in our list as well as our object, and then we'll go ahead and append our list to our main list. Okay, and then what we'll need to do is after that we'll just print out our list. Now inside of our function, the only thing that we'll need to do, instead of when we detect that it's an object, we don't want to append it, but we'll just put an empty string here, and then instead of the actual property name, what we'll need is actually the value name. And that's pretty much it. It should work. That should work. So let's go ahead and clear our terminal, read and run it, and there you go. So we have a list within a list. We have the names, and then we have the values. Now let's go ahead and output this into a CSV file. So a CSV file is nothing more than a collection of strings, and so we don't need the CSV library to do this. Again, we want to the challenge is to use as less libraries as possible, and we could have done this without using the JSON library, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and just put this items inside of our CSV file. So we'll do with open, we'll do output.csv, and then we'll do W for write as output, and we'll say output file. And then we'll do for A, and so we need to just loop over our items inside of our list. So for A in list 1, and then we just need to write these items out to our file. So we'll do output file dot write, and our delimiter is a comma separated. So we're going to turn this into a string. So we'll do join, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do a map. The reason why we're going to do a map is because there are numbers inside of this. So as we know in Python, if we wanted to turn something into a number to a string, we can just do use the str function. But because we're inside of a list, and we need to do this on all the items inside of our list, we'll just use a map function to iterate over that. So we'll do that, and then we'll do plus. We need to do a chars return. So I misspelled open. So that should work. That should output our data into our CSV file. Let's go ahead and run that. So we'll just hit the up arrow. You see it output that CSV, and there you go. We have all of our items here. Okay, so looking back at domain.py, I can see that there was an error here. On line number 35, I forgot to change this function name. So the recursive function name should be add items to data. So let's go ahead and close out our output.csv and rerun the file. I have it open in Microsoft Excel, so let me close that out. All right, let's rerun the file. That looks a lot better. Okay, let's go ahead and open it up in Microsoft Excel. Okay, great, that looks a lot better. We can see that our address and our geo, as well as our company, is blank, which it should be, because as you look inside of the data, that was just an object. And so we just wanted to put that inside of our CSV and then just put an empty string for all those columns, for all those rows rather. So is there a way in which we can make this code, the question is, can we write this code with less lines of code? The answer is yes. But that wasn't the point of this challenge, right? So the point of the challenge was to take a JSON object and to turn it into a CSV. Now, when you're doing coding challenges, the most important thing is to write the code once in order to get a solution. Then you can go back and reiterate over your code to make your code cleaner and more leaner. But essentially, this is a code to take a JSON object and turn it into a CSV, and we didn't use any other libraries besides the JSON library. And we could have done this without using the JSON library as well. But at any rate, that's the coding challenge. Hopefully, this was educational, and I'll see you in the next video.